Welcome back, Howligans. Here's another episode of Movie Howl, starring both Joe and Ryan. We're here to give you another one, but I'm gonna let Ryan introduce this movie because it was suggested to him by his fiance.
Yeah,
this must be one of her picks.
Yeah, I'm a little speechless going into it. We're talking about The Lost Boys to start with, which came out in 1987. So I think
yes,
the same year as the Monster Squad.
Oh my gosh!
Interestingly enough, so that was unintentional.
That is interesting.
So
I have different opinions on this than I might have had on the Monster Squad.
So you were telling me before we started recording that your fiance watched it with you and thought this definitely had to be something I suggested to my fiance and not something that she came up with on her own, which is not true because I'd never seen this movie before. I completely see why that came up because this is 100% my kind of movie. Because I called her after it was over. She was out. And I was like, because I asked her if she wanted me to wait. You know, she's like, no, you don't have to wait for me. You can watch it whenever you get a chance. This is my movie. It's my kind of movie.
Is this your movie?
Yeah, I like this one. I liked it a lot. I enjoyed the whole thing all the way through. It was like infant Kiefer Sutherland. God, I can't even say the name. Was just one of the more unsettling parts to me because he's still kind of relevant, at least in terms of like memes and pop culture. But
okay,
yeah, it was a fun movie. It was just really good. It was like what I wanted from a Monster Squad follow-up. You know, just grittier, like crazier, more over the top. It was awesome. I really enjoyed this. It's totally the kind of movie I would have picked if I knew it existed.
Okay. I feel like, unlike Lucky Number 11, when halfway, if any of you Halligans have listened to our review of that, I played devil's advocate with that movie for Ryan for about halfway through our review just to mess with him because it was one of his favorite movies of all time. So I did that on purpose just to give him some shit. This might be a real one where I disagree with him. Now I get it. I understand why you're saying that. This was a very, if you watch this, you know 1,000% this movie came out of the 80s. There is no doubt. The hair, the music, all of it, the style, came out of the 80s. Now, I knew about this movie. Apparently, unlike you, I was surprised when you said you had never heard of this movie. Yeah. I knew about The Lost Boys. It was never anything that I was hyped to see, and you suggested it because Kim suggested it, and I'm like, oh, I guess I have to watch this now. But I didn't know what I was going to get. I really honestly didn't know anything about it. And I mean, I knew it was a vampire type movie. I had a hard time with this movie, bro. This was not an easy watch for me. Right.
First, we should explain what it is.
Do we need to? Mm-hmm. 1987 movie is like 20 some odd years old.
Yeah, so 20 something. How do you figure 25? 30 something.
Oh my God, yes.
This movie's 35 years
35 years. I even figured that math out last night when I was watching it. 35 years old.
Yeah, no, this movie is it's very 80s. It takes place in California. I think it's a spiritual prequel to our favorite Hawk and Rev.
Oh yeah.
I got real Hawk and Rev vibes off of it. Like
I get that.
Good Hawk and Rev stank on this one.
Smells good.
So, yeah, it's about a family, kids, very 80s, that moved to a new town because there was a divorce. There's like very little said about it. You know, they don't spend a ton of time exploring it. There's not a lot of hand holding to feed you the story of why they're there. Just little lines like, oh, you know, how did you end up getting divorced and end up worse off? Like, that's not how it works for women, stuff like that. And she's like, oh, I didn't want to go through the legal battle. Right. That's like all you get about their history. She's moving into her dad's house and her dad's like this ridiculous hermit. And he says one of the first really good lines, you know, the kids see murder capital of the world spray painted on the back of the welcome sign. And one of them asks, like, is that true? And he's like, well, let's just say if all the corpses suddenly stood up, we'd have a population problem.
I will say the dad in this movie, the grandfather, I guess, the dad of the mom, I recognized his voice, like big time. I was like, oh, I know that voice, and I looked it up, and I tried to place where I knew him from, and I mean, a few small things came up, but nothing that like jumped out at me why I knew his voice. But I knew that guy's voice. He had some of the best lines in this whole movie. This movie did have some really great lines. One of my favorite lines from him was, so you're right. Mom, divorced, couple of boys, they move to a new town, they go to live with the dad. And Corey Haim, who ended up being part of the Corey and Corey thing. It was Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, because Corey Feldman is in this. They did a number of movies together, late 80s, early 90s. That was a thing that they did.
Yeah.
And one of them is, I wouldn't say relevant, but still around in Corey Feldman. But Corey Haim, if you look at IMDb, his photo on IMDb is still him from when he's a kid, basically.
Well, so he died in 2010.
Yeah. So he hasn't done.
Yeah. Right. It looks like he wasn't active towards the end there. I guess that's what you're.
But the grandfather in this had some fantastic lines, and they go, and Corey Haim's character is all upset because there's no TV, but he thinks, oh, maybe there is a TV because there's a TV guide. And the grandfather's like, I read the TV guide. Well, if you read the TV guide, then you don't need TV, because I read the TV. Oh my God. It was
my dad would say something like that.
That was a great line. I really did like that.
But so these kids move to their grandpa's house in this new town, and they're exploring things, and you get the sense that there's something going on because you see flashes of things happening, and you see these kids, this kind of gang of kids running everywhere. And not to spoil a 35-year-old movie, but they're vampires in town.
There are vampires in town.
And it's, as usual in the 80s, up to the kids. I think the only one where the adults are fighting monsters is Ghostbusters. That's probably about it.
That might honestly be true.
Or a scary German guy in Monster Squad.
Oh my God. So this, from the very outset of this, you know it's an 80s movie. The music, you see, the very first scene is a carousel, and they're the punks who you end up finding out are vampires. One of them is the non-Keanu Reeves half of Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
You see him in it, and they're the hairstyles, all of it. The music, the vibe, all of it is very 80s, which this movie came out then. That's fine. I don't want to just trash it because of when it came out. That's just the thing. That's fine. But I did really enjoy the song by Jim Morrison and the Doors, When You're Strange. That part of the opening, where it's just like a montage of all the different types of people, and it has these little posters of missing kids because obviously vampires, and they're doing their thing. I dug that. I really liked how they threw that in there. And my fiance was asking, is this supposed to be, is it supposed to be Coney Island or wherever, some specific spot? And I think they just picked wherever this town was, Santa Clara.
Yeah.
The murder capital of the world. They see on a sign is the back of a billboard as they go in. They just picked it to represent maybe a couple of different towns in the U.S., like one of those. The Coney Island, but it's in California, but it has that vibe to it. There's a boardwalk. There's an amusement park. There's things to go do. But it was a fictional place. But I did like that beginning of it. And for the most part, I did not... Even though I grew up... I was born just before the 80s. So I grew up straight 80s. A lot of the music, not a big fan of 80s music. There's some of it that's good, some of it that I like. And there was a little bit in this that I did like. But for the most part, it was rough to get through. This was a rough one to get through, brother. Oh man. Not that it and you're right. You talked about one of our favorite movies that we've reviewed is Hawk and Rev. But and this did have a similar feel. They knew what they were doing. They weren't trying to be more it wasn't trying to be more than what it was, which is fine. I just don't think I liked it as much as you did. Overall. My
Yeah.
view of it overall wasn't as positive as maybe I've been led to believe by what you've said so far.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. And it could be a product of the way I watched it. That I was like kind of busy all day, working, doing whatever, like running errands. And then I come home, throw on some headphones, put this on the TV. And it's just like, oh my God, like, they're really going there? They're doing that? Like, they're showing this stuff? Like, one of the best scenes in the whole movie is where they stake one of them.
Ha!
The,
Okay. Yeah, I got
the,
that.
the bit, yeah, the
They
non
don't take
Keanu
one of
Reeves
them.
half.
They stake the lesser half of Bill and Ted.
Right.
Those bastards.
When they do that, they're like looking for them and they look up and they're all hanging from the ceiling. Like that is such a good scene. It's so good. Like it's freaky. Like it's one of those scenes where like the practical effects really paid off. Like actually having them there, they would just use CG now. Now there are some things where the effects are really bad, like where Michael lets go of the bridge and drops, and he's just like,
Oh
and
my
it's clearly
gosh.
him
Oh my
standing in
god.
front of a fog machine, just like leaning back and waving, doing the super secret signal from Team America. It's
Yeah, that was
like
rough.
that one. Yeah, that was a little bit rough, but some of it was so good, like the skeleton coming out of the holy water at the one point.
Yes.
Like there were so many effects that were great, and it's like I just was so enthralled by the visuals of it all, and the fact that it's like so much gorier and more violent than you would have expected it to be, being that it's kind of a kids movie. It's like the kid is going and telling his mom, "This is going on," and we think Max is a vampire or whatever, and they're doing all this like kid stuff, and it's one of
Hmm.
these things where it's going to end, and nobody's ever even going to know that anything happened. But it's like no, their stuff gets messed up.
Yeah.
Like there's no way for people not to know what happened there. And the last thing the grandpa says at the end, that like that line, which I'm not going to spoil, is just like such a perfect way to end it. Like that. Oh God,
I'm
it was so
sorry. You're
perfect.
not going to spoil this 35-year-old movie? Like, come on,
No,
bro.
no, no.
Which
You can sit
you're I
through.
agree, I do agree with you. That line by him was really good. I liked him a lot. I really enjoyed and he wasn't it's not like he was a major character or anything. He really wasn't. But I did enjoy him quite a bit. I enjoyed the
Yeah.
grandpa. The mom uh was you might say disposable. I mean, you're talking Diane Wiest. And when I
Hmm.
hear the name Diane Wiest, I can only think of, and I haven't watched this in literal years, but there was one of the early seasons of Family Guy. They talked about Diane Wiest like it was some big deal. And other than hearing that name there, I knew none of it.
Hmm.
I looked up a little bit of this for, as I'm watching it, I'm writing my notes down. There were there were things in this that if you're a fan of this style of movie, I think you can enjoy. I think my
Hmm.
hardest the hardest part for me was the heavy 80s vibe that came with it, which was real rough. It's rough to go back and watch that now. And I don't know why that is. I just some of it, like you talk about the scene where he falls off the bridge, Michael, and none of these characters, they're no last names. They're
Yeah.
only first names, which I thought was a interesting, fun, however you want to look at it, kind of a thing. I recognized names of this right away. They said director Joel Schumacher,
Yeah.
and they had certain things that popped up ahead. I'm like, oh, I know who that is, and I know who this is, who did other things like Interview with the Vampire or Gremlins or American Werewolf in London. They're associated with other things, and I don't know. Some of those other ones are just I just prefer those to this. I wasn't trying to go into this thinking, oh, another one of these. Because the last time I thought that, and I thought that before I even sat down and watched this, I'm like, you know what? I wasn't hyped to watch Monster Squad, but
Mm-hmm.
it ended up turning into something that I really enjoyed. This, you know what? I'm just going to sit down and watch it and see what I think. I don't know why Corey Haim was the thing. He was kind of this goof ass little kid. I I'll be honest, I like Nanook, his dog, better than I like
Yeah.
him as a character. But he was that's not 100% true. There's a scene where he goes into a comic book shop run by the Frog Brothers.
Yeah.
You
Edgar and
throw
Allen.
Oh my
Right.
God, you throw my air quotes there. The Frog Brothers, and I have to say this right now, were single handedly the best and worst parts of this movie that could have been. Corey Haim had this accent that was utterly ridiculous throughout
Corey
the whole thing.
Haim or Corey Feldman?
I'm sorry,
Corey
Corey
Feldman.
Feldman.
Because
Thank
he
you.
dropped his voice so low for a
He
little kid. He
did.
was so young.
It was so ridiculous. So it was him and his quote his brother in this. But there's a scene where Sam, Corey Haim's character, goes into this comic book shop and he's like, "You can't put Superman blah 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 in this section. They haven't even discovered red kryptonite. You can't put this over here because of blah blah blah." Like wherever he came from, he knew what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't like joking about it, and they gave him this vampire comic, and it was a way to just a little foreshadowing. One thing I did like about this was it didn't rush anything. It took a little while to build up what was going on in the
Mm-hmm.
world. They didn't just jump right into stuff. It took some time before you really understood what was going on. Like you knew there was a problem. You knew like the security guard gets killed and this couple who are making out in a car get killed. And I remember writing that down. The first couple of killings were ridiculous. But
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed the fact that in those killings, you didn't see anything. You didn't see any of whatever the villain was, whatever the monster bad guy was. You didn't see any of it. And I like that. That's one of those things that they don't do enough in movies right now. That they just show everything too early because they're trying to get jump scares or whatever it is.
Yeah, like the remake of House on Haunted Hill from 10, 20 years ago, something like that. Had
Maybe.
like Chris Kattan in it. He was like a
Oh
caretaker
my
for the
God.
house.
Ah!
It had him and Jeffrey Rush. I remember those two specifically. I know there are other actors in it that were a big deal, but Jeffrey Rush and him were like that did it for me. But that movie had a lot of really good suspense and it was really slow build. And then they just blew it with this like Goosebumps style, end mad dash for the finish. And it was just
Ugh.
terrible. It was just they built it up so well. It's almost like how I told you to watch the first 2 seasons of Arrow. It's like don't go further because they lose their patience for what they're doing and they just blow it. And it's the same with this movie. I wish that movie you could like watch the first hour and then just stop and be like, just assume everyone dies and then
Okay.
go about your business. With this movie, it feels like they did a lot of it right, like you're saying. Like they took their time, but it still feels fast paced. They don't hang on to anything. They don't linger on stuff. There aren't these like lingering shots of people contemplating what's going on or having like existential crises or anything like that. They tell the story they need to tell and they move pretty quickly. And I
Yeah.
kind of wonder if a little bit of this is a product of digital cinematography
Mhm.
in that you're not wasting film to do it. Like if you read some of the stuff that Tarantino has said, like there are articles about, what he thinks of filming with film. Like The Hateful Eight was shot on film. He had like these
Right. Yeah.
fantastic old film cameras and like some of the shots are beautiful because of it, but there's also a lot of expense with that, so there's a lot of waste if you're doing shots where it's just, oh, let's just film so and so looking around for 10 minutes and we'll clip out a little bit of that to use for like b-roll somewhere.
Yeah.
It's just there's none of that here. Like there's no waste. It's real, trimmed.
I can agree with that. there were some man, buddy, this movie, there were some things in it that were rough to get through. Like I like a good chase scene, but they had a bike somewhat chase scene in this movie
Yeah, like a
where the
dirt bike
main
thing.
character of Michael, I believe,
Yeah,
was his name, who was played by Jason Patrick. Oh, he chases all the vampire, Kiefer Sutherland being the head vampire
yeah, as
of that
David.
group, and he like there's this bike chase. It was so bad. It was so hard to watch. It just it hurt
Why?
me. It
Why?
hurt. Like, come on. I know it's 80s, but there were movies that were done before then, like Bullet, like things that were done that were like they had chase scenes that were well done. And you have this, they were like, I guess they just discovered what fog machines were. So they were like,
That's
we're going to overuse fog machines and it's going to be ridiculous. And
all right.
things in this that were hard to watch, man. I
There
don't
is a
know.
scene where it looks like it's Michael and David on like those little rocking horse rides outside a grocery store in a fog
Yes,
machine. Like that is what that looks like. You don't get
it
any sense
is.
of like the speed they're going, but they do have some cool aerial like tracking shots at the beginning of that where they're going across the beach. That's kind of cool looking. Like just tearing across a beach at night on dirt bikes.
Which has got to be fun. Like to ride a dirt bike, ride it on a beach, whatever. I get that. I can get into that. That's fun. But the
Mm-hmm.
way they did it, some of it was hard to watch. I mean, I'll just straight up be honest. One of the things I have to ask you, and I don't know if you noticed this, I actually paused it and rewinded the film a second to show Tasha, who is my fiance Halligan's. But is this who this was? I paused the movie because in Sam, Corey Haim's character, his room on his closet door, like his uncle gives him this, or not uncle, his grandpa gives him this stuffed like gopher or something,
Yeah.
and he was like, oh, I'm gonna put you in the closet. On his closet door, why does he have a sexy poster of Rob Lowe?
I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that it was Rob Lowe. I
It
noticed it was a
is.
dude.
It 1,000%. And I thought about that. And she even asked me, like, was he like a model back then? And he's like pulling up his shirt a little bit and, shows his abs off. And I'm like, that's 100% Rob Lowe. And I rewound it and I paused it right then as he closes his closet door. That's Rob Lowe.
Oh my god.
Things like that were great. Kind of in this movie, kind of like in the Monster Squad movie, there were nostalgia elements. Things
Mm-hmm.
that I saw that they weren't doing it for that sake. They were just doing it because it was the time frame of the movie. When it was just this is when the movie came out. This is the things that are going on right now, and I dug that. I'm not going to say that I didn't, but like when I was a young man, if I put posters up on my wall, it was like Pamela Anderson and Jenny McCarthy from my time frame. Why do you have a sexy poster of Rob Lowe, bro? Like I didn't get that unless they were trying to say something about his character.
Maybe.
Saying something without saying something.
I
But
mean,
I
well,
just happened to notice it was Rob Lowe and I thought it was funny.
that's a good point to make though, that back then they didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
They didn't need to be like, "Hey, this person is this." They could just have stuff like that and not
Yep.
have to explain it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I did notice that. I thought that was odd. I was like, is that a dude? That's a dude. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I didn't
It was at
recognize that
least
it
a
was
dude.
I didn't recognize who it was. It was just like, that's cool. Whatever. um wow, okay, I'm lost.
So there's a scene in this when the way this all works out is the scene we talked about where Michael, the older brother of the two of them, there's a bike chase scene and he goes with the group because he's trying to get with the girl who's in the group,
Mm-hmm.
and they go to their hideout. It's off a beach somewhere, and they talk about there was a big earthquake and this big resort that they'd made. It collapsed into this area because it was right on a fault line, and so they're using that area as a hideout.
Mm-hmm.
And so he does some stuff, and he like drinks out of this bottle, which was the blood of the head vampire, and so he becomes a vampire. And you end up finding out when he goes and confronts his brother Sam, the Corey Haim character. And I wrote this down. One of my favorite lines was, "You're a goddamn shit sucking vampire."
Yeah. Yeah, I like that line too.
Right? But he's not concerned for his brother at all. He's just like, he doesn't freak out about it. You're a vampire, and he like tries to run away from him because he's in the bath, which I thought was odd because the character Corey Haim plays, he's like my oldest daughter is 15. He's around that age period, I'd say. He's not driving age yet. He's 14, 15-ish. And so he's in a bath and he's listening to some music and he's like in a bubble bath and he's like shampooing his hair and jamming out. I'm like, why is he in a bath? Like, take a shower, bro. What do you, but whatever, for the scene. And the dog, Jason, is that the elder brother's name?
Michael.
I feel it. Michael, thank you. I knew that wasn't right. So Michael, he's starting to feel the effects of what has gone on, and he opens the bathroom door, and Sam has his dog in there, and the dog attacks Michael because it's already been shown beforehand that dogs kind of pick up on the vampire vibe and they don't like it, which I thought was odd because I'm pretty sure the dog that picked up on it was the dog that belonged to the head vampire in like the end of this. When you figure out what's going on, that the dog that they showed doing that was that dog. But whatever. He didn't react the way I expected him to react if he found out his brother's a vampire. Like, they show him in a mirror, he's like, "Oh, look at your reflection." And he's not, there's no reflection. It's like a Back to the Future and you're fading away.
Yeah.
And like he waves his hand behind him and he can kind of see him, but he can see his hand behind him, kind of a thing. And I did enjoy when Michael's character, he like wakes up and he's up on the ceiling because he's flying. Because apparently these vampires just have the ability to Superman fly, like just fly around, not like as a bat.
Yeah.
As you might think in certain
lore.
There's so many different ways to view vampires, so it's really hard to keep track of the lore, as you would say, of it.
Right.
And he's outside his brother's window, and there's a whole thing, and his brother finally lets him in, and that was kind of nice. I thought that was a more realistic thing. Like, you're my brother, and instead of just being like, "You're a shit-sucking vampire," it's more of a, what can I do to help you? How can I fix this?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting approach too, the way they did that. Like how fast that reveal was. Like it was a slow burn of him like feeling it, and a really cool scene of his kind of silhouette going up the stairs, going towards the bathroom, the dog noticing something's up.
Right.
And then it seems like so quickly it was, yeah, you're a shit sucking vampire. I'm telling mom, basically.
Right, I'm like, telling mom. Like, come on.
Yeah, and then he's like, he's just convinced by his brother, like floating around outside his window, to open and let him in. And then all of a sudden, he's like back on his side. It's like, I don't know, he accepted it so quickly, and then latched onto it as like, you're in trouble because you're a vampire,
right?
And then kind of like, I don't know, it's an odd series of things to go through.
It was.
I don't know. I don't know that it's any more or less realistic than anybody else if that actually happened. If you actually found out somebody was a vampire, I mean, might go through a range of emotions at first too. Like running away and locking yourself in a room seems pretty logical.
It does. Oh my God, there's so much to this. So Michael finds out he's a vampire. He goes and tries to go back to where he was turned into the vampire to meet the girl.
Yeah, Star.
And instead of being super freaked out because he can half see his reflection, he's flying in the air, he goes and meets with her and she just starts making out with him.
And
I'm like, I I get it. I was a young man myself. I understand what it is like to think with your nether regions, but
Yeah.
you got more to worry about than getting laid, bro.
Yeah, it was
That was rough. That was rough to swallow.
that weird choice of words, first off.
You're welcome.
I did think that was it was another one of those things where I was sitting there and I was like, are they doing this? Yeah, they're
Yep,
doing this.
they're
Yeah.
doing this.
Okay, first off, is there screaming going on in the background?
Yes, there's a goddamn cat in this other
Okay.
fucking room. It's a pain in the ass.
Okay, that was what I wanted to ask. I can hear
Listen.
it, so I'm assuming our listeners might be able to hear it, and they might be like, was there screaming at the X minute mark? And did they just
There
ignore
might
it?
be.
I thought it was one of the cats, but so what else should we get into? How should we go from here since I've interrupted our flow?
That's all right.
I really like I'll just go with what I like. And I guess I should mention that my fiance likes this or heard about this movie and watched it because the lead singer of Motionless in White said that it's his favorite movie because he identifies with the kids coming to town and being new and being outsiders and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
So that's her favorite band. She yeah, she said that's basically where that came from. That's why she heard of it. Went ahead and watched it and wound up really liking it. It's not the kind of movie I would imagine her liking normally because she doesn't really like blood or gore or guts or violence or anything. No, actually, she likes all of it. She just doesn't like seeing it happen because she watches all these crime shows where you see like people that are just, it's like the most horrifying thing you can imagine. But because you don't see it happening actively, it's okay for some reason.
So it's like when John Mulaney talks about CSI
Yeah.
or whatever it is. He's like, no, you can't say the F word, but you
Yeah.
can
It's
say
like,
the victim had anal contusions.
yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh my God. Where he's talking about Ice-T and the
Right.
stuff Ice-T says on that show.
I
Yeah.
could just
No,
listen to Ice-T forever.
she's like, oh, yeah, his intestines are out. I see. And she's like eating lo mein. It's like, how can you? No. But if she tries to watch the first episode of Reacher and somebody punches somebody else, she's like, I can't handle it. It's too violent.
Oh my God.
But this movie, mm. So I like the violence in the movie. I like, that the vampires are difficult to understand. The lore isn't nailed down. There's no like sparkling in the sunlight. It's different if you're one of the ones that was recently turned versus like they don't explain like why some of them can't go in the sun and some of them can. I guess the transformation's not complete until you make your first kill. That's kind of what I'm getting.
Yeah, there was a
But
little bit of that to it. That something was going on, and they want you to make your first kill, and that like solidifies you as a vampire. I guess.
yeah, I like that they didn't have what they usually have, which is the scene where they're like, okay, and here's the lore for these.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of that in like the Twilight movies, like, okay, and here's why it's like this. Here's what the vampires can do. Here are the rules for this world. In this, they didn't do that. Or in the Monster Squad, they do that stuff. They like lay out what the rules are for vampires and how they work.
Yeah.
In this one, there's even a scene where they're saying like, oh, but why didn't this work when we tried to do that? And there's this like very brief throwaway line about why it didn't work. And it's just like, I appreciate that they're kind of saying like, it's not like the movies, kid. Hey, this is Ryan with a quick spoiler warning. Joe is about to ruin a major plot twist in this movie, so if you don't want to know before you watch it, tune out now.
I can dig that. There's so much like there's scenes of this that where the kids of it, Sam and the Frog Brothers, and they're trying to, out certain people and it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. But I did notice something. Like they think it's this Max guy who has been in, oh my God, the actor of Max has been in so many different things. You've seen him in a ton of different things.
Overboard.
Right. One
He
of
was the
them.
cheating husband
Yes.
in the first one. Gilmore Girls.
He's been in a lot.
Because I know I
seen
mentioned him
this
before for
actor
that
in a lot
reason.
of things.
Yeah, we've talked about him before on here, and I said that I was thinking of the Gilmore Girls because it's like there are certain channels that it's just always on 100% of the time. It's like Cops on G4 back in the day. Like it's just always on.
Always on. I did like how so they think it's him, and they have a fairly interesting idea as to why they think it's him. But he's like trying to date the mom, and he
Mm-hmm.
comes to the door, and he's talking to Michael, and he's like, "Well, I'm not coming in until you invite me in." And that
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
wasn't
you're the man of
anything
the
they
house.
talk about in this movie, but for people who know vampire lore, who know anything about that, you do realize that they need to be invited into your house
Yeah,
in order to come in. And that
yeah.
was an interesting thing. But
I'll
when the boys are trying to, they do all these different things to try and out him as a vampire, and it doesn't work. Yet you end up finding out later in the movie it doesn't work because he was invited in. And I liked that. I thought that was clever. That they went ahead and the things that you would try to use to figure out is somebody a vampire, it didn't work because you went ahead and used this rule that vampires live by, that they have to follow. And as much as I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of this movie in and of itself, there were things in it that I did enjoy, that I thought they did well with, and that was one of them.
Yeah, that was what I was trying to get at without giving away that twist.
Oh well, if you haven't seen this movie, I'm sorry, guys. Like,
I can put in a spoiler warning for a 35-year-old movie.
right? Yeah,
Yeah, but I don't know, man. I liked it. I like the music. I don't like 80s music that much. I'm with you on that. There's a lot of 80s music that was good, but there was a whole lot that was really bad.
it was not good.
I mean, there's just so much music from the 80s. There's a lot from the 80s that's bad. There's a like Kill It With Fire, bad.
There were certain
And
things in this that I really enjoyed. The scene that was, and they have to do this in 80s movies. It is a, if it the movie came out in the 80s, it has to have this, and it's a montage. And it was a very small montage of them getting ready to fight the vampires after they've gone and assaulted the vampires. And
mhm,
Kiefer Sutherland's character is like, come nighttime, we're coming for you. Whatever it is, whatever he says. But
yeah.
we're gonna get you at nighttime. And so they're getting themselves ready. They go into a church and there's like a wedding going on, or like
No,
a
baptism.
baptism going on. And they're just taking the holy water. It was so good. I like that. I actually like that a lot. That
Yeah.
was really good.
Yeah.
So there
That
were
was a
moments
scene
in
that
this,
lingered. That was a scene that lingered for good reason.
right?
They all come in, they dunk their canteens in the holy water, and everybody just turns and looks, and the priest is like kind of like looking through the top of his glasses, and they just all watch him. And then like some of them even turn around and look, and then just turn back around back towards the baptism.
Yeah, they have like this, contemptful look on their face, like, how dare you?
Like
But,
if you must though.
right? I will say the scenes where there's like an ultimate conflict with them and the vampires, and there's some death scenes of vampires.
Mm.
Because of practical effects, I still like those. They were over the top, they were crazy, they were probably more than they should have been, but I still liked them.
Yeah. Oh my god, what was that Tarantino movie we watched a while ago? Dusk Till Dawn.
Which is not a Tarantino movie. It's a Robert Rodriguez movie.
That's right. That's right.
Yep. He
It
was
just
in it.
feels like a
Tarantino was in it,
yeah, it just feels like a Tarantino movie.
right?
Um yeah, there are a lot of deaths in this that reminded me of that.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. Although these were like even more metal
Yes.
than some of the ones in that. Oh my god, Death by Stereo.
Right?
There were a lot of really quotable lines in this. There were a bunch where it's
There
like, I wish I
were.
was watching this on my computer so I could just clip out that audio and just
So
uh
one of the quotes that I really enjoyed by one of the Frog Brothers, the not Corey Feldman Frog Brother,
mhm.
was, "Kill your brother, you'll feel better."
Yeah.
Like, come on. It was good. There were some moments in this that weren't terrible, but oh
I
man.
also really like that Feldman never lost that voice.
He didn't.
It was like, do it or we're gonna have to do it. And he's like 10. and he just has this like super deep, like ridiculous voice the entire time. And there's no point at which, like, usually in movies, when you have a character that has this fake persona they're putting on, they drop it at some point, and
Yeah.
it just never happened here. He never dropped that. He was just that the whole time. Like those two were that the whole time. There was a little bit of like, oh my god, we're actually doing this, because they act like they're like pros at it, and then when they actually do it, they're like freaking out. But there's nothing else to explore that. They never like admit that they're frauds or anything, because they actually do what they're supposed to do. They're just freaked out by it.
That was, oh my God. So the Frog Brothers, holy shit. So you've got these two kids, and they're kids.
Yeah,
They're not like adults, but they're running this comic book shop. It feels like they're running it
it
because you don't
does.
see anybody else there.
Yeah, there's like a
And
Leo from that '70s show asleep in the corner the whole time, but like that's it.
right? Um, it's oh my gosh, like they're these kids who are doing this, and they give Sam's character this comic book that's about vampires. He's like, oh, I don't really like horror comics. It's like, oh, you're gonna need this one. It might save your life.
Yeah, survival guide, I think they called it.
Yeah, there's certain things in this that were foreshadowy or that were done in a manner that I didn't dislike. Like I talked about the beginning part of it, and they had the song by Jim Morrison, which there was a scene in it later on where it there was like a overlay, like it had Jim Morrison's face, and there was an overlay of different things that were going on, but Jim Morrison's face was in the background, but it wasn't going on while uh the Door song, When You're Strange was playing.
Well, there was
It
a
was just
poster in the hideout too.
yeah. And it was just there were things in this that were, I think, done really well. It's a Joel Schumacher film, so there are things about it that are well done. I think the 80s part of it, some of the things that were very 80s-esque kind of turned me off.
Yeah.
But and it wasn't Hawk and Rev like enough that I think I could just sit back and enjoy it. I did try. I really did try, but it was rough for me to straight say that I enjoyed it. I didn't. This isn't the kind of movie that I could, unlike other movies that I've watched, all the movies that I have sitting in my DVD case right now, and I've gotten rid of probably more than half of them after I moved, and there was a whole set of things that went on, and I had to get rid of a bunch of them. All the ones that I kept, I could go grab any one of those, put them in my, I won't say DVD player, I'll say whatever video game system I've got, and I could watch any one of those. This isn't the kind of movie that I want to watch again. I'm good. But there were things in this that were actually okay. I as I
That
look
that would be a
through
great quote to put on the front of the box. Like, there were things that were actually okay, Joe.
yeah, you quote me on that. I will say one of the things I like to do for us for this is look up, especially with IMDb, all the trivia. They have a trivia section and throw things at our hooligans and just give you little facts and different things. This, as I scroll through it, had some of the longest amount of trivia that I've seen in any movie that we've done.
Right, hit
Like
me. I didn't look at it. I didn't even
oh,
know. I didn't know
there's
there was a
so
trivia
much.
thing on IMDb.
Yeah, there's so
I
much to it. I was actually really surprised. Like it talked about the reason, like I didn't even know this. I noticed there was the Rob Lowe poster on his door. The reason there was a Rob Lowe poster on his door because Joel Schumacher had recently directed him in St. Elmo's Fire.
oh,
That's why his poster was on the door. Like small things like that. But there was so many things. Corey Haim, he said that this filming of this movie was one of the greatest personal experiences of his life.
hmm.
And I hope he enjoyed it. He was a young man at that point. Young kid to do this. And we know, having grown up around, well, okay, our set of young actors. There was other young actors, the girl who played Annie, things like that, Judy Garland, before our time. But we know, like, what's his name from Home Alone, Macaulay Culkin,
Yeah,
things like that. Corey
like
Haim,
Fred
Corey
Savage,
Feldman.
people like that.
Right. People who grew up, who were young when we were young, who did this sort of thing. And Corey Haim obviously isn't here anymore. And that's fairly tragic because he should be.
Yeah.
That Hollywood kind of, especially with young actors, can chew you up and spit you out. I'm glad he at least got to enjoy this because things like this, you're going to be remembered for this. Whether good, whether bad, how I view it, how you view it, it's, I mean, realistically, that doesn't matter. I hope people get to see young people who at least tried. They were given an opportunity to do something like this and had I hope you had fun with it. Like that's what it's supposed to be. When you're a young person, what you're supposed to do as part of your life is fun. So let's hope that when you get to do things like this, I've never had an opportunity like this. You've never
Mm.
had an opportunity to go and be in a movie when you were a young person and be known well beyond what you should be. There's YouTubers now, there's TikTok influencers. I guess that's the word.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
so bad you don't even want to say it. Your body's like fighting it.
a little bit. But don't let that kind of thing go to your head. It's difficult. I know that it can be. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Quoting some Spider-Man, I believe is what it was. But this sort of thing should be fun. If you do it when you're a kid, at least have fun with it. And at least I felt like when I watched this movie, regardless of how ridiculous it was, how much the 80s part of it might have turned me off, I felt like the kids who were in it had a good time. And I can at
Mm.
least say that about this movie. That I felt like the actors who were in it, especially the kids, they were having a good time. And so I can appreciate, even if this wasn't anything that I ever want to watch again, I can appreciate that for it.
So you're don't watch.
Oh man, that's a rough one. Halligan's, I don't know. I really like to say, okay, we come down to it now. It's is it a watch or a don't watch? This is one of those that this might be a watch for you. This is not a watch for me. I'm not the 80s stuff that was in it, and as soon as it started, the hairstyles, the outfits, you knew what it was.
The big greased up guy singing at that concert.
And I even told my fiance, I'm like, you know what? If I look like that guy, if I was built like that guy, I'd probably be greased up all the time too. I'm gonna be honest, oiled up like Ramses in Nacho Libre.
Oh my god,
His muscles
yes.
are the best. His eyes are the best. Like if I look like them, you know what? Oil me up. Let's do this. I said that to her as I'm watching this movie, but it was there were parts of it that were really rough, and I don't think this is something that I would pop in and I would watch again. And because of that, only because of that, I'm going to say this is not a watch for me. Because if it's a watch for me, it's something I would put back in my whatever video player I have or whatever streaming service I have. I would watch it again. This is
Yeah.
not one of those movies.
Okay. I really had fun with it.
I'm glad you did.
I really like a movie that's a complete experience. It's one of those things where so many pieces of content now feel like they're meant to be part of something else. You know, it's to put this into kind of a like consumer perspective. It's the same thing I've been complaining about with like my Apple products. Like I appreciate that they work really well together. I don't necessarily love that they feel incomplete without each other, if that makes sense. Like I know my iPhone can be better if I'm using an Apple Watch. I know my whatever. And it's just one of those things where it's I know this movie is good, but it's also part of this larger thing, and I'm worried about what they're going to do with it, or what the ramifications of these different things can be, or how the lore and the rules have to be consistent over multiple movies or iterations or encounters. And this movie has its own lore. And they have their own set of rules. They have their own set of characters. They have their own unique location where they're not interacting with a lot of other stuff. And it's just a one and done. There's no like hinting at something bigger. There's no trying to tie into something else or be like, it's just like the movies or it's just like this or like the Monster Squad where they're like, okay, these are the rules. These are the rules that are real. It's very much like kids stumbling through it. And I like that. And I like that it was just self contained. Does that make sense?
I know I agree with that. I really like the self-contained aspect of that.
And I
I think
like.
that's something that we are missing in movies nowadays. Everything is trying to be a franchise. You don't have to do that. Just make a good movie, have a good story, and be self-contained. It does not have
Mhm.
to continue all the time.
And I think a big component of that makes me like this is that there's still mystery. Vampires are mysterious things. And it wasn't. I don't know. I don't remember when the Anne Rice book started coming out, but I feel like that's when we started romanticizing vampires,
Okay?
and this wasn't doing that. I mean, it a little bit was, in that the boy saw a pretty girl and whatever, but it wasn't like, oh, I want to get with this vampire because they're a vampire and they're just misunderstood and whatever
Right.
else. This was that, like, you didn't know what they were capable of. Like, they're constantly doing things like they're playing chicken towards this cliff, or they're seemingly just jumping off this bridge, and like, come with us, just follow us, do what we're doing. And the guy's like, are you kidding me? And then they, all the stuff that they do is like very mysterious, very much, gives you the same kind of feeling of like, well, what's going on that Michael's supposed to have. And I really, really like it. And I like that they're also trying to find a place where they fit in. You know, um, the younger brother finds that in the comic book with these two ridiculous kids, and Michael finds it with these guys that he happens to meet when he's trying to flirt with this girl.
Yeah.
And I think a component of that would be missing if they were trying to set it up for something else. I feel like, like we're saying, a lot of movies now are made with the idea that there could be more. And if that were the case, they would have used this movie to explain the vampires.
I
They
can
would have
dig that.
beaten into us the rules of how these vampires work. And they didn't. Like, there was like, oh, this didn't work because of that, or this happens because of this, or things that are implied, but they don't necessarily understand how they worked. I mean, there are a couple little things like maybe the dog serves this purpose, or maybe this is why this is happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the Frog Brothers are throwing out some stuff that some of it ends up being
Yeah.
true. And it's just, I like that it's not all like there are clearly defined rules. They set everything up and they're setting up a world. Because you wouldn't go through that in real life. Like if you had this encounter, like you're fighting for your life, you wouldn't then perfectly understand all the rules and nuance of what just happened. So I guess that's what I like about it, that there's uncertainty. I feel like I'm on a journey rather than having something spoon fed to me.
Okay.
And I also just like that it's ridiculous and that they go places I didn't expect them to go. And I like that the grandpa does some of the stuff that he does. Like he's trying to hook up with this widow that
Oh
he's
my god, that was
doing like
great.
taxidermy. Like he's like, oh, I'm going to go see the widow Wilson to deliver this taxidermy. And they're like, what'd you taxidermy? Mr. Wilson?
No, that was some of the stuff with grandpa was really good.
Yeah.
I will say, um, one of the things I read about this as I was looking up some trivia, some different things. Corey Feldman's character, Frog, he almost wasn't in the movie. At the time, he was struggling a lot with drug abuse. And you're talking about a young person in this, right?
Yeah.
That face, I get it. Like drug abuse, but this young actor who's struggling with that, he was he was having trouble showing up to work because he was coming down from a cocaine binge,
Wow.
which I've not even had any. I've had that's not true. I can't say any. I've had very little contact with any world that involved cocaine. It's been very small because that's nothing I wanted to deal with in my life at all. But Joel Schumacher was really upset that he kept dozing off during the filming and was unable to continue filming. So he fired him, but he hired him back the next day after Corey apologized and swore to come to work prepared from then on, which he did. But you're talking about young people. And Hollywood letting this happen to young people, not just Hollywood, but their parents as part of it, I'm sure. And that's a thing too. But Hollywood just being the people in the boardroom who wanted to make money
Mm-hmm.
and thought, this isn't, I don't care about these young actors. Whatever they do is fine with me as long as they show up and they do what they're supposed to do. And so I read that and I thought that was pretty sad
Yeah.
that, somebody that young would be that caught up in a world of drug abuse and problems.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't know.
How old could he have been in this movie?
I was just
16,
looking that up.
17 at the most?
Yeah, I was just looking that up. It looks like he would have been around that age when it came out, but what
Right?
I found said that he could have been as young as 14 when it started filming.
Right. And if he's 14 years old and is having problems with cocaine, that's terrible.
Yeah. Also found out from his Wikipedia that they did make a directed video sequel of this in 2008.
I did notice that there were a couple of different sequels that not Corey Feldman, but the other Frog brother,
Yeah.
I think had starred in as a part of this, and that was interesting. We're not going to do that. Just I'm throwing it out there right now. We're probably not going to review those.
I'm going to watch it.
I mean, hey, Ryan might recommend this to me. He might say, "Hey, we need to watch these." But
yeah,
for this,
all right.
for this movie, what do you think, Ryan? I mean, I've already given you asked me watch or not to watch, and I have to say because I would not put this back into my DVD player, I would not pull this back up on my streaming service. It's going to be not a watch from me. What do you say, sir?
Okay, so I'm starting a business, and we were talking about the legality of having a prize system in this business where one would throw a suction cup dildo at a prize board and stick it to win something. And I'm trying to figure out how to ask my lawyer if this is okay with gambling laws in this area. So I want to just let people know that that's where I'm at and the kind of things I enjoy and think about. So from that perspective, I really like this movie. I say it's 100% a watch. It's on Netflix. Okay. So again, if you have like Apple TV or something, it's not going to search Netflix. I don't know why. Use the Just Watch app. It'll show you places where you can watch it. Use your local library. They'll probably have it. They don't know what it is. It's great.
Well, I guess that's our those are our thoughts on this movie. There are some redeeming things with this movie. If I had to say anything, the grandpa makes this movie maybe worth watching by itself.
Yeah, where the kid comes in.
I loved him in this as a character in this movie.
When the kid comes really in with his sunglasses and the grandpa's like, looks like I'm not the only one who got lucky last night.
when he's with the Sam's character, he's like, all right, we're going to go to the city. And he starts his car. And then he immediately shuts his car off. It's like, no, this is as close as I like to get to the city.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We're going to town. Yeah.
I can feel that in my soul. I dig that, Grandpa. I know what that's like. But Halligans, once again, thank you so much for listening to us rant and or rave about a movie. I like that this is one that we maybe disagreed on. Ryan liked it more than he thought he was going to. I was not as big a fan of it. But you know what? I would say there's a few redeeming qualities of this movie. So if you're into this style of movies, you know what? Give it a shot. But otherwise, you know what, guys? Don't hurt yourselves. You don't need to hurt yourselves. It's fine.
Well, and on that terrible disappointment, you can all get a hold of us by email at moviehowl@gmail.com, and you can get a hold of Joe specifically on Twitter at moviehowl.
I got you, boo. No problem.
All right, man. That's all I got.
That's all I got, too. Thanks again, Holligans. We really do appreciate it. Until next time, I have been Joe.
I've been Ryan.
And we are out.
Gonna go watch the sequel.
Yeah, sequel!